as a couple more people file in here, I am going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I'm Assistant Director of Admissions at Northwestern University's Department of Physical Therapy and Human Movement Sciences. Mouthful. So I really help with recruiting students to our department. So I'm on the road sometimes, and I'm talking to pre-PT clubs, and I'm at college fairs and things like that. And then I help students through the application process as well. So again, a lot of you, we've already communicated, we've already engaged with each other, and hopefully you've gotten the core of what our program can offer. And we're super excited today to be able to showcase our department through a different lens, which is through our amazing world-renowned faculty who are part of the neurological team. And so we have Dr. Lois Hedman here, we have Dr. Rachel Tappan, and then we've got Dr. Jane Sullivan. And so first, we will go ahead and I'd love them to go ahead and introduce themselves, and then we'll get started after that. So we can get started with Jane. You want to start us off?
Is that because I'm next to you in the Brady Bunch?
I see.
All right, yeah. It's not because I'm the oldest, Daniel, is it?
No, ma'am, not at all. The Northwestern background just popped out to me. I was like, yeah, okay, you have to start us off.
So Daniel had asked us to talk about a few things. One was the time that we've been at Northwestern, and I've been at Northwestern for a very long time, more than 25 years. I started as a student. I worked for a while as a teaching assistant in the labs, and then became faculty. Clinically, my experience is working with adults who have neurologic conditions, mostly stroke and spinal cord injury. I started my career at what was then the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, which is right down the street from Northwestern and is now the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. I worked in a spinal cord injury program in the VA system, which was very interesting. I worked in a large county hospital in acute care, and I've also done some home care. So I've done everything, I think, except outpatient, which is kind of surprising because a lot of people do outpatient. I teach in neuro, of course, which is why we're here. I also teach in electro, and I do some bits here and there in other courses. Daniel asked that we talk about our research. So I am part of a team that works with people who've had stroke. We have a large NIH-funded study, and we're looking at a custom designed 3D printed device that has a muscle stimulator embedded in it. And our hope is that that will help improve arm use for people who have moderate to severe arm dysfunction after their stroke. And my fun fact, as you might guess, is I love purple. I love all things purple. So it was destiny that I ended up here at Northwestern.
Literally everything that I've seen Jane own is purple. So she in fact does love purple. Thank you so much, Jane. So now we'll go ahead and open the floor for Rachel, please.
Sure. So let's see. So I also went to Northwestern as a student. I was in the class, I don't know if this is fair game to say, I was in the class of 96. And then I worked at what was then the Rehab Institute of Chicago not too long after I graduated. And yeah, bit by bit made my way back to Northwestern like Jane, started teaching in labs, and then I joined the full faculty in as a core faculty member in 2016. But really I've been around since like 2008. And I still do have a clinical practice at Shirley Ryan. I'm there about 8 hours a week. And my clinical practice is split between seeing patients with neurologic dysfunction and people with pulmonary disease. So my background in neurologic PT is pretty broad, though recently I would say in recent years I've seen more people with spinal cord injury more recently that sort of where my professional life has taken me. I'm involved in the Academy of Neurologic PT, so I'm the chair of the spinal cord injury special interest group there, and serve in some other committees related to the American Physical Therapy Association. So with that, so my clinical practice has sort of followed that. And what else? So I teach in the neurologic curriculum as well as in the cardiopulmonary curriculum here at Northwestern. And then from a research standpoint, so I've done a few areas of research over the years. I spent a few years working in a brain stimulation lab, which was super interesting. And now more recently, I've started doing some work in developing interventions to help people with pulmonary disease start to do long-term exercise, not just while they're in PT, but to carry that over longer term. And then my secret hope that I guess you hear first is then, my hope is then to be able to expand that eventually to folks with neurologic dysfunction as well.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And so we'll finish it off with Lois, and then actually Lois is going to be the one to give us an overview, a brief overview of the neuro curriculum as well. So take it away, Lois.
Hi, welcome to everyone. I'm Lois Hedman, and our stories are going to sound very similar because I also worked at Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, although it was RIC at the time, or the Rehab Institute of Chicago. My areas of clinical interest were people with brain injuries. At that time, that population was just beginning to survive because of the advances in medical management. And so I found that population really interesting, but also worked with the stroke population as well. I came over, same thing, did some labs, and then came over as full-time faculty and have been here quite some time. And it's hard to believe how long I've been here in terms of how much things have changed and just how still exciting it is to learn and to teach and to work with students. So I primarily teach in the neuro curriculum. And also we have a course at the beginning of the curriculum called Introduction to Clinical Decision Making. So that's another area of interest of mine, is helping students develop the capacity to make decisions and to reason clinically. From a research standpoint, my focus, I have a couple different focuses. One is looking at individuals who are post-stroke. I'm interested in describing the characteristics of how they maintain their balance. I've also done some work in training individuals to help them to improve their reactive capacities to maintain their balance. I'm interested in also in, as I said, clinical reasoning, and I'm working on a study now, a qualitative study that looks at faculty, both clinical and academic faculty, their experiences of working with students and describing some of the behaviors the students show, both that contribute to the development of clinical reasoning, or in some cases might actually detract a little bit from their clinical reasoning, to understand how faculty deal with it in the academic setting, and also some barriers to that, because we want to make sure, and this is something that we really emphasize at Northwestern, is that we're preparing you from day one to be excellent clinicians. And we want to make sure that even though you might be in a classroom, we're still starting that training of thinking and acting like a clinician, like a professional. So that's another area of interest. And my third area is I'm interested in trying to help create diagnoses, so movement diagnoses that physical therapists can use. These are different from medical diagnoses. And so been working on that with a group in our National Academy of neurologic physical therapy. Yeah, so with that, I can give you a little bit of a description of what the neurologic curriculum looks like. It is comprised of 5 courses, and there's 3 that are the clinical courses. So there's a long-winded name, but we call them ND, which is short, but those are the 3 clinical courses. And we teach those in tandem with 2 neuroscience courses. So a long time ago, we used to teach all of the basic science courses first, and then the next year we'd follow it with the clinical courses, and finally dawned on us it would be a good idea to teach them together so that there might be more chance of carryover and really understanding, why am I learning this neuroscience? What's it going to mean for me as a clinician? So we've been doing that for the last several years. I think it's worked out really well. In the neuroscience curriculum, it's mostly lecture, but there is a series of neuroanatomy labs. So we go over to the anatomy lab for several sessions, and the students don't do a lot of dissecting like they do in anatomy, but we go through lots of sections, and it really kind of complements what you're learning in the classroom. In the ND, or the clinical side of things, I'd say while there's some lectures, there's a lot of emphasis on laboratory work and also small group discussions. So many times we break up, and one of the 3 of us, we would each have 10 students that we would work with the whole session. And what that does is it allows us to really see and interact with those 10 students and understand the questions that they have, if we can look at their skills, if it's a skill based lab, and give them feedback on it. It just allows us, I think, to have a better connection with students, and also I think gives the students in a smaller group a more comfortable feeling of being able to ask questions than when you're all together. So we do a lot with that. And then I think the last thing that I would say we do that I think is really terrific is that we bring in a lot of people from the community who have a neurologic dysfunction of some sort. And so we'll do that for labs that will give you an opportunity to maybe practice some examination or some treatment skills that you've learned on your lab partner. And then you'll get to see it on a real person who's not role playing, they're just being themselves. And then in our 3rd neurologic course, the clinical course, we actually have a several-week practical exam where you work in a small group, like four students and 1 faculty member, and you follow a person for 5 different sessions over the entire trimester. You go from initial interview and observation all the way through providing intervention and looking at their outcomes. And so that's really just a great opportunity for students, because it allows them to be in the clinic when they're not yet in the clinic. It's great for the volunteers. They love coming in here to work with our students because they get something out of it. It's not just an academic exercise. They really gain something from these sessions. It's wonderful for us because we can, as faculty, we can watch and really see what those 4 students we have, what you're thinking, what you're doing, how you're processing things, how you're interacting with the volunteer. And it's just wonderful for us to be able to have that kind of really intimate experience. And it really makes us feel like, hey, we know kind of how you operate. We kind of get not only the specifics, but also the gestalt of how you will be as a clinician. So that's, I think, one of the highlights of the curriculum. So I think, Daniel, maybe I'll stop there and let you take it over.
That was an awesome, thorough overview. Thank you so much, Lois. And honestly, this is going to be a great time for you all to ask your questions. I mean, I'm really excited to have you all here. You come from all different universities. I mean, on the list, I see Northwest Missouri State University, Michigan State University, UIC, Penn State, Georgia Tech, Haverford College, University of Michigan, University of Delaware, North Carolina State University, University of Arizona, Northwestern University, University of Michigan. I mean, you're from all over. And so you all have different backgrounds, different interests. And we are really excited to hear what your questions are. If you're not familiar with the hand raise feature in here, that's what we're gonna use. So the way you can go there, do you all see the does anyone not know how to do it? The raise hand feature? Oh, okay. All right. Okay, one person. So
It's under participants.
okay, thank you. I was like, can everyone see manage participants? Okay, cool. It's under participants, so you can go there, and then I'll be able to see like who has a question, and we can choose you. So we will go ahead and get started. All right. Is it Yu Chao? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay, awesome. Yu Chao, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm Yu Chao. I just graduated from Haverford College. I majored in cognitive science, and I'm very interested in the program. So I guess the first question I want to ask is, how does you all shared your faculty research, which sounds really engaging and great, but I wonder how does that get incorporated into the, like, other than, I saw some capstone, I guess, posters online, but I'm wondering how if one chooses to, can a student take research further during the 3 years of like the overall clinical grad school training?
Well, what I would say, that's a great question. I think you're right. We do have the capstone. What we call it is the synthesis project, and so that's something that lasts about over a year. It's typically done in small groups with a faculty mentor. I think if you were very interested in doing something on your own, or if you maybe identified someone that you wanted to work with, you might be able to do more with it than the synthesis groups do. It would still have to fit in with the curriculum. The curriculum is, kind of set, and so and we kind of carve out about 4 hours a week. Typically, it's on a Monday or a Wednesday afternoon where the synthesis groups work. So if you wanted to do something that took, more time than that, then that's something that you'd have to kind of, work out. But I think there could be a possibility of, tailoring that if that was something that you were, very interested in.
Can I add, piggyback on what Lois just said? So Yu Chao, the synthesis projects are offered by all of the faculty, because all of the faculty have an area of research. And the students spend a lot of time in their first term learning about all the projects, meeting the faculty, kind of weighing what fits for them, and then they rank order their choices. There is an option if a student has a passion for something that is not offered. And that option is for them to sort of create a project, but that's based on finding a mentor who's an expert, because we feel like you need mentorship in this area of research. I think it doesn't happen very often because, for one, there are so many good choices. In a given year, there's probably 20 or 25 choices, and most people find something or many somethings that appeal to them. I think the other thing that happens is when they really think about the challenge that might be in finding someone who is an expert, if that means going outside the faculty, that's a lot to take on top of the classwork. So it's an option. It doesn't happen very often. I think students typically find that there's something in the choices that are offered that really resonates with them and that they feel like they'll get a great experience in being involved.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does that answer your question, Yu Chao? Okay, awesome. So next we're gonna have Mary Kate's question.
Hi there, I'm Mary Kate. I'm actually doing a career change to physical therapy, so I am more than excited to get going on this and to learn a little bit more about each section of physical therapy. I've only had personal experiences in orthopedic and outpatient, so I'm really interested in neurological as well. My question is more on, and perhaps this is already answered within the answer about the clinicals and the coursework, but I noticed on the website there was this motor control framework. I'm just curious how the neural aspect would be tied into that. And maybe you could touch more upon the motor control framework and how it is at, or what it is at Northwestern in regards to neurological.
Hey, Lois is the obvious person to answer this question and take the fabulous question. So Lois is the obvious one to answer this. I'm just going to preface her answer with, so Lois is one of the authors of the motor control framework in the first place, and the work that she was talking about that she's doing more nationally with our professional association around movement diagnosis and so on, it like builds on all of that. So when I think back on my time at Northwestern, you know, this was decades ago, this was like a way that from the get-go Northwestern's really been like ahead of the curve. Now suddenly the rest of the profession is saying like, whoa, we need movement diagnoses and like base all of what we're doing on movement rather than necessarily medical diagnoses. So Lois should definitely answer your question, but I'm just going to point out that she's the bee's knees on this. That's all.
Thanks, Rachel. Well, Mary Kate, it does warm my heart for somebody to pick out the motor control framework and want to hear about it. How much time do we have? No.
Well, I ask because I've had personal experiences with the neurological and motor connection. So I really am genuinely curious how Northwestern has put this all together, and it's more of a personal connection too. So yeah. I'm glad that you're here and can answer that for me.
Yeah. So myself and two other colleagues many years ago developed this, and it was developed out of a need at the time. And this is back in '96, so quite a while ago. The profession was seeing that we were kind of operating in silos, like, so the orthopedic physical therapists kind of thought this way, the neuro this way, and it really, what we were, and in addition, what we were doing, I think, particularly in the neuro area, really wasn't keeping up with the advances in neuroscience and other movement sciences. So what it is, it's very simple. It just, number one, focuses on watching people move and really describing how they move very explicitly in their stages of movement. The other thing that I think is unique about it is it really fosters one to not just consider, you know, well, I know this person has a neurologic problem, so I'm just going to kind of focus on that. But, you know, they still have muscles and joints. So I also need to consider the biomechanics of the situation. I need to also consider any physiologic issues that are going on, as well as behavioral issues. So it just encourages you as you're being trained, and then as a clinician, to always being looking at the whole person, and also understanding kind of some of the principles of how movement's controlled. So the idea is to keep what we're doing as physical therapists linked to what we know about movement control, as well as motor learning to a certain extent, but just focusing on movement, because as Rachel alluded to, the profession's been kind of having this conversation for about, oh, I don't know, 4 decades about what's our expertise. And we kind of make these little inroads, and then we all collectively kind of fell away from it. But I think now, you know, we're sort of building momentum that it is about movement. And that's why Rachel was saying we were kind of ahead of the curve, because we've done that for, you know, since Rachel was in school. So I think, and that's a real big emphasis. So the motor control framework is in that course I mentioned, the Introduction to Clinical Decision Making. That's where we introduce and have students apply some 4 basic frameworks, one of which is the ICF, or the International Classification of Function and Disability. We use the motor control framework. We use the principles of evidence-based practice, as well as the patient-client management model, which the profession uses. So we pull them all together in a way that gives you a little smattering of them, and you apply it to a case. And in that course, you're in a group and you have a case that you follow all the way through. It's a video case, not a real person, or you're not with the real person. So we started there, and then we encourage that to be used throughout the curriculum. So it's not a neuro thing, it's not an ortho thing, it's just a movement thing. And because we want all of the, that's sort of tying everything together, that everyone who's trying to move and maybe has some movement dysfunction, they have all these systems. It's our job to watch how they're moving and make hypotheses about, well, what do we think is the issue here? And while a person may have had a stroke, which you think of as a neurologic problem, you know, a big issue for somebody might be the fact that their joint is restricted in movement. It's not really neuro, it's more biomechanical, or maybe it has to do with their fear of moving. So that's really how we really try to tie it together, and that's a curriculum-wide tying it together. And we don't, you know, the nervous system is pretty important for movement, but the nervous system doesn't work by itself. It's, you know, there's all these movement systems that they work in concert, and that's kind of how we're trying to train our students to think.
Awesome, thank you so much. That was great. I feel like that's what's exciting about physical therapy, is there's so many different connections to within body movement. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Lois. So Kelsey's question was next.
Hi, you guys. Thank you again for doing this. This is really nice to hear a faculty's perspective. So kind of piggybacking off of Yu Chao's question earlier, I was wondering how open the faculty are to meeting with students outside of the classroom, to, like, if they're interested outside of their synthesis project, to discuss what they're doing in their research lab, and like if they wanted to learn more about certain aspects of a class or something like that. How open are the faculty to setting up a meeting with the student?
I could start, but very. We're pretty much, we love talking to students outside of class. I mean, we enjoy our interactions within a class, but there's, you know, something very different about, you know, being able to, you know, dig down, and of course we want to talk about things we're interested in. So I would say we're very interested in doing that.
I would add, we're big, but we're very personal. We have a lot of little families within the big Northwestern family. So the synthesis group, that's a family. That's a group of students and faculty mentors who get to know each other really, really well and work a lot together. Every student has an academic advisor. That's a little family. You may have a particular clinical passion, pediatrics or sports medicine, and you may align with a faculty member who has that background or that passion. And I think we spend lots of time talking, getting to know each other. We don't have office hours because we're there all the time. I mean, people just kind of float in and out of your office. And I think, you know, our perception, I would say for the three of us, I'm sure, is that it's a very open door kind of place. If you have the opportunity to talk with students, though, you should ask them that, because, you know, we think it's great. But you also want their perspective. But I'm hoping that their perspective would be the same, that they feel like it's a community of lots of little groups and lots of little families. I mean, we're all on a first name basis with each other. You know, they know where we live. They know what our hobbies are. Yeah, I think it's a people place. So, and that's why we stick around, right?
And actually, Jane, I heard that you and your students, did you all go on some kind of really fun adventure or something like that? Could you talk about what you did?
Yeah, I have a bit of a reputation. So at the end of the synthesis process, which is about 1.5 years, and you spend lots of time together and you really do get to know people well, we party, we have a celebration. And so we've done kayaking, we've done escape rooms, but the famous one is skydiving. Which ended with me breaking my leg. Yes, but you know, it's kind of we work hard together, we play hard together. You know, we have these really good cohesive teams. So yeah, so I have this reputation for, and I of course had a purple cast when I broke my leg.
Of course. Thank you, Jane. And we've got some awesome questions coming up. I see we've got 4. Nikki was next, so have Nikki ask her question.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm a rising senior at Michigan State University, and I just had a question about volunteer opportunities. Like, if a student became interested in neuro, does Northwestern offer any volunteer opportunities for them to get more involved with relating to neuro?
I can speak to that. So, well, there's one structured piece that's essentially a volunteer service kind of a project that's not specific to neuro, but that's the PACE project. So all students do a PACE project where you do, again, some volunteer work. It's not meant to be necessarily administering PT, right? But that's a project that's aimed towards doing some service kind of thing, but that also helps you with your professional development. And certainly students have chosen things around people with neurologic dysfunction, you know, so certainly Shirley Ryan Ability Lab is a rehab hospital. We've talked about it already a bit, right? That's nearby. They also have a fitness center, right? So we've, like, one of my advisees right now, she's going to be doing her service project with their adaptive fitness program, doing helping with their bocce ball program. And it's largely people with neurologic dysfunction in that program, for instance. So you can choose your project around that. So I think that's one version of volunteer work, I suppose. And then the other, I guess another type of volunteer project would also be more like professional development kinds of things, like, you know, I think a few of us now have mentioned the Academy of Neurologic PT. So I've had quite a few students approach me over time. I'm sure that Lois and Jane have as well, of like wanting to get more involved in the professional association. And so, like, for instance, I mentioned I'm the chair of the Spinal Cord Injury Special Interest Group. We have a social media coordinator. And so the person who's currently in that role for us is actually someone who just graduated from our program. For the record, I was not the one who could get her the job. When we all voted for which student should get that, I had to recuse myself from that vote. But helping, you know, I've certainly helped students along the way, and I know others have as well, like, get involved in that type of volunteer work as well. So it kind of runs the gamut.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that? There are a number of individuals who live in Chicago who are connected with Northwestern in one fashion or another, who are constantly seeking PT students to help them. Sometimes they're paid positions, but oftentimes they're volunteer positions. And I can think of one in particular. He's a probably under 10 little boy who had a childhood stroke and is seeing a physical therapist, and the parents are interested in him having connections with people who can help him practice the exercises that the therapist have given him. And this little boy has been around for several years, and each year a certain group of students will work with him, and they sort of pass his connection on to the next group. And so there are a lot of people who reach out to us because they're looking for students who have this interest and who have these skills. And again, some of it's volunteered, some of it is paid. You know, students who may go into somebody's apartment and help them with some of their personal care, you know, early in the morning, things like that. So it's a little different than the source of your question, but I think it's another opportunity for real life hands-on experiences with people who have neurological kinds of diagnoses.
Thank you so much, Jane. So next we've got Grace. So we'll do Grace, then Lexia, then Star.
Hi, my name is Grace. I, like Mary Kate, am changing careers into PT, which I'm really excited about. I'm riding this amazing learning curve. I currently live in Chicago and was volunteering at Shirley Ryan up until everything got shut down. So I'm curious as to what school has looked like for the past couple of weeks for you. And if you're working at Shirley Ryan as a clinician, what are you up to? I'm sure, Rachel, you have a lot of pulmonary disease. So what is that like on the front lines?
Well, maybe I'll speak to the question about Shirley Ryan first, and then we can talk about classes as well. And so, yeah, thanks for your question, Grace. So at Shirley Ryan, my clinical practice is on the outpatient side. I'm curious, where were you volunteering?
I was volunteering downtown. So I was on the spinal cord floor. I was just about to like settle into one specific area when the volunteer services got suspended. But it's an incredible facility. I feel like I'm in a sci-fi movie when I'm in there. So I'm curious what work is like.
Pretty amazing place. So for anyone who like hasn't heard of it or hasn't been there, it's a new building, and it's big and beautiful and state of the art, and it's really
orange,
luxurious as rehab facilities go, for sure.
And actually, I'm sorry, I have to throw in there, it's ranked #1 in the country, right? It's the #1 rehab facility in the United States, and I think it's been ranked #1 for the past 24 years in a row. So I mean, it's where it's at.
Yeah, they never mention it at all. It's an amazing, I mean, I've been there a long time. It's a really amazing place. So my practice is at the main hospital too, Grace, but on the outpatient side. So on the inpatient side, they're obviously still doing inpatient rehab. There's a COVID unit now, like specially designated COVID unit as well. On the outpatient side, right now there's no in-person services happening from a therapy standpoint, but there is telehealth services happening. So basically largely like this, except conducting PT, which has been a really, I think, nice change too. Hopefully that'll stick around longer term. And then they're in the process of figuring out a plan for when the state opens back up of ramping up. It'll be a gradual process too, though. So like, I have not been in the clinic because the folks with pulmonary disease, for instance, will not be the first folks back, of course. But yeah, that process will happen gradually. As far as classes go, so yeah, since, what was it, March 16th, I think is when the online classes started. And so that feels like a really big question. Yeah, so we've been functioning online. Lots of classes happening by Zoom, some lecture style, some, many smaller groups as well. I think it really largely reflects what happens in person in a lot of ways, though we've certainly had to like quickly kind of ramp up to that. Yeah, Jane, Lois, do you all want to, it's like, it feels like such a big overwhelming question right now.
I guess I would like to comment on the fact that there are a couple of us who have had an interest in online blended education for some time, long before the last several months. Several of us have been involved with the professional association in actually teaching others to do online and blended education. And there are a number of our classes that have for some time had components of the class that were done remotely. So an example is in a second year course in electrotherapy, where the students for a number of years have done much of their didactic content in interactive modules that we developed. So they watch these modules. Embedded in the modules are all sorts of fun little activities. And then they come to class and they ask questions and they talk about, what they've learned and what questions they had. And then we take them into laboratory experiences. And we actually have studied how they perform in that kind of a format versus when they're on site for everything. And student performance is really quite good, and student satisfaction is quite good. In that one particular course, that's been my experience. So I think, fortunately, we had some experience and were able to get up to speed more quickly than I think maybe other people did, and looked at remote education as more than just, do whatever you were doing before, but just do it at a screen, because that's not really good education. And so I think that there's been a lot of thought before this, and certainly in the last several months, about what are the best teaching principles, what's the best way to help students learn that uses, whatever formats become available to us. So, so I think even when this is hopefully behind us, there will still be portions of courses that will be done in this blended format, because for some content, it really does work quite nicely.
I just wanted to add that while it was a big shift, because it came on fairly suddenly, for us, it came on over the weekend. Now, I didn't have to personally have to switch that quickly, but many faculty did. And I think that while it was hard, it's like the culture of our department is, okay, plan A is not working, what's plan B? And we kind of accept that, if external forces mean that things aren't going to happen, what are we going to do? Because our goal is still to keep the education, process going as much as possible. So that's just kind of second nature to us. And I don't know if that's because most all of us are clinicians, that because you have to do that all the time in a clinical setting. So that was one thing. I think the other thing is that we're taking this as okay, we're going to learn something from having to shift everything over. And even if we hadn't done something online before, and now we, have to do that, we're finding things about it that are kind of positive, or we've had to switch the order of certain things. And we're finding that, well, maybe we'll keep it switched. Like there's things that sort of unintended benefits that we couldn't have predicted. We're trying to, keep a positive spin on it that way too. I think that this is an excellent question to ask the students. It's tough being a student under these circumstances, I think. I think we are very open about asking for students' feedback. Well, how did that go? Do you like synchronous versus asynchronous better? How can we, those kind of things. So we are really kind of working together with the students. They're helping us a lot to really shape how things are coming about. But there are certain things that, like small group discussions, kind of like we're having here, it's really not so bad. I mean, you really can see everybody, and it's quite nice. And our students have just risen to the occasion and done fantastically in terms of being prepared and also being flexible. So it's an experience for everybody, and we're doing the best we can. And but our main goal is to make sure that our students are getting a different experience, but are they going to still come out with the knowledge and skills that they need? And that's really fundamentally, our goal. And we're not going to let that go. I mean, once you are part of our program, Jane talked about groups. I think there's also just this overall group of, like, if you're with Northwestern or if you're an alum, you're part of the family. And we are personally invested in each one of the students becoming an excellent clinician, because you're going to be our colleague in, it seems like a long time, but in a few short years, you're our colleague and you're our ambassador, and we want you to be, absolutely best. So we're doing the best we can with it. But it's not always entirely smooth, but with the right attitude, you can do it.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add that Rachel mentioned that this is kind of how things will be, telehealth, and I love hearing that you have this positive attitude about it, that this is just something that we will figure out how to do. So I hope everything's going well, and that the students are doing great. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have Lexia.
Hi, I'm Lexia. I actually attend Northwestern for undergraduate. I'm a current junior, and I have a practicum where I work with the men and women's soccer team. And when working with that, we kind of look at the overall picture of just the athletes and their overall health, how that be on a physical movement or like mental health as well. And I was wondering or curious about how the interdisciplinary framework is used, especially within like the PT learning for the students and teaching wise. And if you guys have anything to comment about that.
Can you say a little bit more about what you mean about interdisciplinary?
Kind of combining multiple aspects. So I know that you guys specifically work with neurological, but I know Rachel's talked about working with the pulmonary, and then you talked about how you have to work with a larger team for the motor function. So kind of how you all work together as a unit, and like more broadly how all parts of physical therapy or health in general are incorporated. Okay, all right, thank you for clarifying. Good question. Yeah, that's a really important question actually, because we have courses that are called, neurologic dysfunction, and then we have some that are called musculoskeletal. And there's always going to be a concern that, again, we'll go back to those silos that we're just considering, one system as we're treating that patient. What we are trying to do, what we do collectively is
as students accumulate knowledge in different areas, we try to hold them accountable for that in the next class. So if we know that they have learned about, any issue, we will make sure that discussions about that or questions about that come up. So for example, in our, the group practical that I talked about, where you're with somebody for an extended period of time, many of these people have a chronic condition. And so even though their medical diagnosis is related to a neurologic dysfunction, they absolutely have cardiopulmonary issues. They have problems musculoskeletally. There may be, behavioral issues that are kind of evident and seem to be affecting the way that they're moving and functioning. And so we tell the students, you have to take this person as they come. Even though we're in a neurologic class, you've got to address all of that because you know how to do that. And that's what's appropriate for this person. So we team teach, you probably know that. And there is some intersection between the teaching teams so that we try to keep tabs on what students are learning here versus there and bring them together. There are several instances where courses will have joint labs. They'll have joint examinations, so practical exams, so that we're trying to bring that together. And then there's a course at the very end called Complex Patients, which also one of the goals of that is to not only deal with complex patients, but make sure that even if patients aren't that complex, that you're really dealing with considering and dealing with all of the different systems.
I think the other thing I heard maybe from your question was PT's intersection with other disciplines. So, I can't think of any time in my career that I haven't worked with people from other disciplines, because PTs work as part of a team. You work with nurses, physicians, OTs, speech language pathologists, and there are a number of opportunities and activities throughout the curriculum where our students will work with the prosthetics, orthotic students, the medical students, the nursing students. We don't have a nursing school ourselves, but we have a collaboration with the nursing program at DePaul. We have some activities with the speech language pathology students. So there's a real effort to make sure that our students are comfortable and competent in what each one of the team brings to the table, and that they have experience while they're students working collaboratively with all those different professions.
Thank you so much.
So next we have Star's question.
Hello, I'm Star. So I graduated in December 2018 from SIU with a bachelor's in kinesiology. So I've been interested in physical therapy for a while now, and I actually took a year off so I can get more experience. And I actually had my son my senior year of college, so needed a break to adjust to being a mom. And so currently my question is, I work in a hospital, so I've seen a variety of neuro patients come in and out. And I was also a personal trainer at my undergrad for people with diseases and disabilities as well. So I had 2 brain injury patients while I was in undergrad, and with all the neuro patients I see at the hospital, I know it can range in variety of symptoms they'll have and type of thing one person could do compared to like 2 people who have strokes. One can have symptoms of this, one can have symptoms of that. So I'm basically wondering during the curriculum, what kind of strategies are used to help us like to be comfortable with those situations of how to defer certain things from another. Like, are we given case studies where we have to assess and diagnose treatments, or do we have multiple clinicals with different types of patients so we can get the gist of things, or just, is it kind of like as we go along the way, we'll find out in a sense?
I can start. I think you're exactly right. No matter what a person's medical diagnosis is, it doesn't really adequately describe what they look like and what their problems are. And so that's one of the things that we really focus on is, take that person, have an understanding about their medical diagnoses, but really watch how they're moving and deal with them as they come to you. Because there's such a variety, we can't provide you with examples or case examples of every different variation. So what we generally do is we will provide you with maybe the most common presentations so that you can at least have a general idea of how, maybe this group of patients might look different than this group of patients. And we'll say, typically here's a principle that you can count on, like maybe in post-stroke, we might say typically people will be more involved distally at the ends of their extremities than they are proximally. However, the next thing you know, there's a patient or a video that doesn't show that. So we deal a lot with principles, and we know we can't show you everything, all the different variations, but we do a lot with just principles so that you can kind of hang on to those things and then recognize that, oh, here's a variation from that. But we do a lot of cases, quite a bit, in a variety of ways. They're on paper, we do them through video. We use a lot of videos because we're interested in movement. So, and then we have real people coming in. So through that process, we try to give you enough experiences where you start to get that idea of what the range might look like. But again, that's just the beginning of it, and it's only going to expand as you get more clinical experience.
And we do a lot of encouraging students to think on their feet. So, we might take that example. If you take that example that Lois gave you, that, okay, the more common presentation with this medical diagnosis is this. And then you work through it, you talk about what you might do, and we say, but what if? What if instead of that person had more problems at their shoulder? What if instead of the way the patient was described, they were a bariatric patient? They were, a very, very large patient. And how would that change what you might do? What if they had heart disease on top of the other medical diagnosis that you were already considering? So we're constantly asking you to kind of be mentally flexible, because that's what you have to do in the clinic is, just as Lois said, just when you think that you've got it all and you've seen it all, boom, you see a patient who has a diagnosis you've not ever heard of, or COVID-19 hits. And so people have to get up to speed on what the needs are of people with this new condition. So I think we take a lot of time trying to prepare students to be mentally flexible, to go back to principles and what they've learned, but not to be thrown off by things that they've not seen before.
Okay, thank you so much. That actually gives me like a way better insight of like what to expect. And that helps a lot, especially the what ifs too, because there's so many things out there. Thank you.
And can I just say, that's probably one of the things that people who practice in neuro will tell you that they like the most about practicing in neuro, is because there's so much range of presentations, and there's so much diversity in what you're going to see, and the complexity in the interaction between different comorbidities, other diagnoses. And I think for those of us who have found our love in neuro, it's it's that having to think on your feet that we really like.
Can I just add one thing that a little tangential, but I think one of the things, this really isn't just about the neuro curriculum, it's the curriculum as a whole. We like to make sure that students experience a little discomfort while they're with us. So for instance, in the first examination and eval course, one of the first things that students need to do is they go to, they have to interview somebody, and they've only had, a very little bit of content on how to do that, principles. And then they're given a case and kind of thrown in, and predictably they feel a little anxious about that. But again, there's no consequence, there's no grade. It's just use these principles to your best. We provide feedback. And then you get lots of more experience doing that. And there's many other times when we'll say, we're going to ask you to do something that you're not going to feel quite confident in. You might feel like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, because that developing that ability to be comfortable with being uncomfortable is actually an important clinical skill. Because you're always going to be thrown something new in the clinic, and we want you to kind of know how to manage that and just move through it instead of being thrown. I think one thing that our students are known for in the clinic is being ready to sort of hit the ground running and be able to adapt and just deal with stuff. And we train our students to be that way. Not always fun when you're going through it, but in the end, students always say, yep, that was a good thing.
And I'll add in there, I think, the point isn't to make anybody uncomfortable. However, learning happens, the best learning happens in some of those uncomfortable spaces. For all of us, that's how learning goes. And hopefully we are creating a psychologically safe space.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. So I know we've got one other question. I see Michelle has a question for us, so you can go ahead with that, please.
Hi, again, thank you for this opportunity. I guess like everybody else in here, I'm interested in PT for people with neurological disorders. As well, I'm a water baby at heart. I teach swimming lessons on the side. And so I'm just curious if anybody at Northwestern specializes in aquatic therapy for people with neurological disorders, because it's something that I would eventually want to incorporate into my practice. And so I was just wondering if there is an opportunity for experience working with that and researching with that.
I don't know. I know there are faculty who, I wouldn't say that they've specialized in it, but they've certainly, that's been a part of their practice. I know Jane for sure. I've done some, and I'm not sure about Rachel. But it's not something that I think principles associated with it, for example, are brought in one of our exercise courses, Foundations of 2, I believe it is. And we'll talk about the benefits of it, and really what is that water environment, providing, that is different than on land. Yeah, so to that extent, I think it's introduced, but to my knowledge anyway, I have to check, there's no labs where students are in the water practicing anything or doing anything with patients, but we fully believe that you'd be prepared to do that with what you've learned. It would just be a different medium.
I can add to that, and this is sort of maybe broader than just aquatic therapy, but there's a lot of specialty kinds of things like that out there. And one thing that we have done in the past, so one of the benefits with Northwestern is we have this close connection with Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. not just where, you know, some of us on faculty are practicing at Shirley Ryan, but also it goes the reverse way as well, where in a lot of classes we have clinicians from Shirley Ryan and elsewhere, but many, we have this relationship, special relationship with Shirley Ryan, where clinicians come to help teach in classes. And so you'll have opportunities to interact with clinicians there as well. And so when there's something specific that you want to see, there's also sometimes, you know, this isn't like a thing that I can be like, yes, this is a thing that can happen, but like, gee whiz, if you were in the program and you said, you know, Rachel, I really want to see how this works in practice. Could you help connect me with someone so I could go observe for a day? I have absolutely helped students set up that kind of a thing, where if it's something that I do, like, sure, come on over and you'll hang out with me. But when I'm not that person, I can oftentimes like help arrange an observation. You know, obviously depends on exactly what it is and what, you know, what happens at Shirley Ryan and so on. But like aquatic therapy, there's a PT assistant who does a lot of that with folks with neurologic dysfunction at Shirley Ryan, who I'm 100% positive would be thrilled to have people come observe him. So, you know, as an example. But yeah, that's not just limited to, that's if you were super interested in robotics, like that's a thing that certainly we can find opportunities for people to get to see.
Thank you.
The other thing is on the full-time clinical experiences, there are sometimes clinical experiences that provide an opportunity for students to get that sort of specialty practice. It might be aquatics, it might be hippotherapy. I know we have 1 or 2 clinical experiences where students are actually, you know, using horses with their clients. And it may be that that's actually a part of the practice of the therapy they're providing, or it might be that in the institution that they're a student, somebody else is doing that. And so for one day, they spend a day in the pool with a therapist whose primary practice is aquatics. So there are opportunities potentially for some of those kinds of specialty experiences to come up on full-time clinicals as well.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll go ahead and end it there. We've had some really great questions tonight, and I know that actually I think 95% of you all are planning to apply this summer. And so applications are opening up in 1 month. I mean, June 17th is when PTCast opens up. And so we wanted you all to have the opportunity this evening to get another chance to connect with us, and in this case with our faculty members. And I am going to send you all a follow-up email that will have the email address of at least one of our neuro team members here, just in case you have any questions for them. So again, we appreciate you all showing up tonight. And if you have any questions about the actual application process or prerequisites, anything like that, feel free to send me an email too. And again, it's been fabulous to be with you all. You had great questions, and we wish you all the best of luck in the application process, and feel free to reach out to us, okay?
Great to meet all of you.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Good night, you all. Good night. Bye, Lois. Bye, Rachel. Bye, Jane.